Hi, and welcome to a conversation about homework from the heart. We're going to be talking about building and retaining inner resiliency during times of adversity, advanced care planning from a spiritual perspective. Over the course of 4 parts, we're going to focus on 4 key areas, and we will cover resiliency and the role of advanced care planning, mental health and well-being when faced with adversity, compassionate communities, and the vulnerable sector of Canadian society. So my name is Laurel Gillespie. I'm the Director of Advanced Care Planning with the Canadian Hospice Palliative Care Association. I'd like to thank everyone today for joining us about these discussions about resiliency and how we can remain healthy in our minds and our souls during this time. But before we begin, we'd like to take this opportunity to have a moment of reflection regarding the social unrest our neighbors to the south of our border are experiencing, and to just let them know that they're in our hearts and in our thoughts, and that we wish for them peace and good health during these difficult times. Our guest today is Reverend David Maginley. He's a spiritual counselor with cancer palliative care and ICU programs at Queen Elizabeth II Health Sciences Centre in Halifax, Nova Scotia. He's also the author of Beyond Surviving: Cancer and Your Spiritual Journey. David has survived cancer not once, not twice, 3 times, but 4 times, which resulted in a profound near-death experience and explorations on the nature of consciousness and the connection of the body, mind, and spirit. He is an advisor for provincial and federal cancer initiatives and lectures throughout Canada on integrative spirituality in healthcare. David knows what it's like to have cancer from both sides of the hospital bed, and has a sense of this life from both sides of the veil. So David, I'd like to begin our conversation by talking about finding and building resiliency from within during troubling times. And you certainly bring to the table a profound life experience around battling cancer. And during those uncertain times, I think it's important to recognize a couple of different things, mainly that resilience, or what I like to call the R2 factor, resiliency reserve. I'd like to speak to you a little bit about that, and that not all of us naturally have a reserve of resiliency and within us, and that we have to work at it. And, I think resiliency is based on some of our life experiences, and some more traumatic than others. But it's difficult that, sometimes people don't have the skill set or the mindset to adapt to difficult situations and find things more challenging to I guess, sort of break down and absorb them and then let them go. And we tend to hang on to things often. So when stress, adversity, or traumatic events strike, you may experience denial or resentment, grief, and pain, but you're able to carry on physically and psychologically. But how is it that some people are better able to do that than others? And what makes that difference? So when you say, and you said this recently, was that resiliency is not found in being strong, but being real, and the connection of authenticity and grounding us in vulnerability and strength. And I was wondering if maybe you could elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, sure. It's such a difficult and complex topic. So thanks for having me on. Thanks for the conversation. And thanks for bringing up this topic, especially at this time. I mean, it feels like the world is crumbling. The chaos, every week there's some new madness that comes upon us, and what's happening in the United States and throughout the world. Oh, I have no words. How can one be resilient in the face of that? Resiliency is found in community. We have very limited resources in maintaining resiliency on our own steam. So when we have community and connection, there is an exponential increase in resiliency. Why some people have more of it than others? Oh, so multifaceted. I know that through my cancer journey, I was resilient every now and then. Most of the time I felt like a wreck. You bumble through your days and you do what you can. But it's pretty clear. I think I would even say it's visceral. Your body knows when you've connected to your resiliency, because suddenly that fight or flight response calms down. You're breathing deep. Your head is clear. Your heart is engaged. So I think this is a skill built over a lifetime. And as you say, crises will accelerate the homework of building that resiliency. When I say it's about being real instead of being strong, I think back on the patients and the many people I've known who have been so authentic in their character while they go through a very difficult time. I have such admiration for them. And I realized their strength came from being real, from being authentic, by knowing who they were, by being grounded in something infinitely more powerful than keeping your cool, or taking care of others, being strong for them. It was grounded in compassion for others. It's as if when you are suffering, it can awake a compassion for others, and that helps you return to your best self and even forget your own troubles, or join them in solidarity with others. So, that's what I try to practice every day with my patients, and that's what I feel we need as a world to practice for all who are marginalized, for all who are wounded by social injustice, and all that's amplified by what's going on these days. Compassion, that's the key. I love the Buddhist tradition. They talk about being a bodhisattva, a warrior of compassion. That's pretty cool. It has its own wisdom. When you're compassionate, you are wise, and you're fully present in this moment. It's great. It's difficult to maintain, but it can be learned and wired into us.
That's really quite profound, and as I think about my own personal journey through cancer, it's amazing how you may not often think that you're very resilient, but until you're faced with adversity, that you
Yeah,
really recognize and see just how strong you actually are. And I think a lot of that has to do with the support and the compassion that you put around yourself.
yeah,
Would you agree?
I totally agree. In fact, I'm grateful that I didn't know. Uh, Looking back, I can see how I was stronger than I thought I could be, how I faced things that I couldn't imagine facing. But if I knew how strong I was at the time, it would have just gone to my head and derailed my whole integrity. We cannot see ourselves accurately from inside our own experience. That's why I say we bumble along and do the best we can. But to experiment with compassion as a tool, sincere tool to center yourself in wisdom, connection to others, solidarity with those who suffer, it changes your relationship to your own suffering. It empowers you to be fully present in the moment. When we're going through cancer, when we're fighting for more moments of life, it's ironic because we're often not present in the moment that we have. Compassion for others awakens, embeds us more fully in this moment. And that's how we can not only go through suffering, we can grow through suffering into the better part of ourselves.
Those are great. Those are great insights into resiliency and strength and compassion. Are there some of your other thoughts around how people can build their resiliency reserve or their personal R2 factor,
Yes,
especially in troubling times like today? Especially, there's so many uncertainties, so many unknowns, and when we don't know what's happening or we don't know, what the future may hold for us, that creates fear within. And maybe you have some thoughts on that and how we can build our personal R2 factor.
yeah, it starts with the basics of the body. The body will tell you the truth of how you're doing. Your mind will tend to deceive yourself or overestimate how well you're doing, or over exaggerate how poorly you're doing. The body will tell you the truth. So I always say, take a moment of mindfulness to build your resiliency. Check in and be real right now. How am I doing? Now, when I feel stress and that fight or flight mechanism, it shows up first in my gut. My stomach is, I call it, my stomach goes blarg. My breath becomes shallow. My heart is racing, right? My muscles become tense. So the body will tell you, hey, pay attention, something's going on. Then, this actually follows a simple acronym for the word stop. So the S stands for stop. The T stands for take a breath, a good breath. O means observe. I'm going to observe my body. How am I? What is my body telling me? So you're trying to fully show up with yourself in that moment. Okay, now that I'm fully here and I'm listening to the body, I'm going to breathe into that and observe it. I'm going to stay with that. Don't do it for too long. 45 seconds, 20 seconds, breathe into it. And then the P for stop means proceed. Go do what you need to do. So that's the first thing, stop. The second thing to build your resiliency is connect. Reach out to others. Connect to those you love, because it's not about facing it alone and being the hero. It's about coming together and healing the world together. This is really hard because we know loneliness is epidemic in our culture. So many people don't know how to reach out, and they don't want to because they worry that their grief or their worry is going to be a burden on others, especially those they love. So they hide their grief. We're talking about advanced care planning. So at the end of life, I find many patients will put a lot of energy into protecting their family from the emotional burden and weight of the experience. So they will say, I'm fine, right? Fine, another acronym. It means flustered, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. Well, these days we are all fine. We don't need to protect each other from that sadness or that grief. When we let others in on that, it builds intimacy, it builds emotional vocabulary, it builds connection. And it's a beautiful thing, but it requires vulnerability. That's the path that leads you to strength. So stop, connect. And the third one, I like things in threes, is use gratitude. Gratitude has a power like a compass of refocusing the heart. And that gratitude, combined with compassion, well, there's no more noble aspect of our character as human beings that could ever emanate from us than those qualities. This is amplified at the end of life. When you're considering leaving this world, to do so with a heart that is grateful and compassionate, fully present and connected, that's a successful life.
I couldn't agree more with what you just said there. And as I reflect on my own experiences around being diagnosed with terminal illness 13 years ago now, I beat the odds, but it's really interesting how it changes your perspective on things and how you really rapidly begin to learn what the things are that really truly matter to you, and that you're so very grateful for everything and the little things that you might not have given a second thought to before. It really changes your perspective, but you have to also allow yourself to become vulnerable. And then that leads into the acceptance part, and then you move on. So from that, personally, I decided is that from now on, I will not ever second guess decisions that I've made and not live my life with regret. But I will make mistakes along the way, and it won't be perfect. And
Yes.
I'm just so grateful that I'm able to still make mistakes, right? And it's accepting it, but it's also part of that whole gratitude that it's not going to be perfect. but just being mindful of that we're so very fortunate to have good health, and live in such a peaceful country.
Yes.
So many things to be grateful for right now.
And out of that gratitude can come great wisdom as you fill out your advanced care plan, right? That is an act of such love. When we talk about your instinct to protect your loved ones from suffering, advanced care planning is going to really help you do that by making your wishes clear and by stating them clear, simply. And it can orbit around some fundamental questions. When I die, because it's gonna happen to all of us. When I die, where do I want to be? At home or in hospital? How do I want to be? Awake or unconscious? You can have some control over that.
Mm-hmm.
Who do I want to be there, right, at my bedside? And what do I want it to be? Well, I want it to be peaceful. I want it to be marked by as little suffering as possible. Filling out an advanced care plan, getting palliative care on board at the best moment, all of that can make sure the turbulence is minimal and your takeoff is smooth.
Mm-hmm.
Really important stuff, because this is the ultimate trip of your life. It's best to plan for it. And I love the Speak Up material and the advanced care planning website. Boy, it gives good resources on starting these difficult conversations and making these clear decisions.
And that's kind of where I was going to go with my next question for you, was about how can advanced care planning help us maintain or even reserve or restore resiliency during difficult times, and build our capacity around it. And I think with the Speak Up campaigns, we're always kind of bouncing ideas around and how to reach out to people and engage them in these really often difficult but essential conversations around what your wishes and values and beliefs are, and normalizing that conversation. And I had sort of a thought one day, I said to my team, which is just an amazing team that we have at Advanced Care Planning, and the Speak Up campaign, is I said, well, no one said, the next time I die, said no one ever. Like, it's going to happen, but you don't get a do-over. It's so you might as well make it what you want, and that's something that you do have autonomy and control over, and you can have a voice. And the other sort of profound thing that we kind of all agreed on is that when it comes to advanced care planning, it's really something that it's up to you to voice who you want to speak for you, what your care would look like, and that engaging at the point in which you engage in advanced care planning, it can be too late at some times, in some certain circumstances, to engage in advanced care planning, but it's never too early to start in that process.
Oh,
It
so
doesn't
well
have
put.
to be about end of life care. It's sort of milestones. You graduate from university. What might I want if I was not able to speak for myself? Often you'll hear workshops that are being conducted across the country. What if you were hit when you're out on your bicycle going back and forth to work, or these sudden and tragic events that happen, and you find yourself not able to speak for yourself, or there's the serious illnesses and the terminal illnesses. But sometimes it can be too late to engage in solid advanced care planning, but it's never too early.
Yeah, so the time to do it is now, when you're feeling well, when there isn't a crisis, right? And think of it as yes, it could be an imagination exercise. You're trying to, run the scenario of, well, what do I want when it happens? Hopefully it's decades from now, but it's good to rehearse. It's good to talk about it. In our culture, we don't talk about death and dying, certainly not our own. And when people are asked, they usually say, "Oh, I want to die fast," or "I want to die in my sleep." You can have more detail than that. I want to imagine that you're going on the ultimate trip and you're going into a desert. Now, you're not just going to walk into the desert. You're going to provision. You're going to research what supplies you need. You're going to go get them. You're going to learn how to use them. You're going to have someone's going to know where you are. You're going to let them know. about all of this. And then you take your trip. You begin walking into the desert. Now, it's a incredibly harsh landscape, but in it is hidden such life. The desert blooms when a rainfall comes, and the flowers. It's filled with animals beneath the sand and sometimes in the air. Getting familiar with that landscape is really important for your survival. But when we're talking about the final crossing of the desert, there comes a point when you will run out of water, when your strength will fail you, and you lie down. Advanced care planning prepares all those supplies and all of your team to walk at your side, not taking your steps, but walking at your side until that point when you can walk no longer. And at that point, you must, well, I really encourage you to do it. We all actually have to give yourself to the wilderness, to give yourself to the sand and the wisdom of your body, which is wired with the knowledge to come into this world and to leave it. That's the point that a lot of people dread, because then they don't have control. Well, no, you give up the ego's control and you rely on the good planning that you've done so that the process from there on is smooth, is gentle. And in my, of course, as a man of faith, I believe death is a transformation, right? I forgot who said, life does not end with a period, but a comma. Advanced care planning is a really important part. And it's a new development, right? We're one of the few cultures that have developed this philosophy in the history of humanity.
That's a really good point, and you know, we have other countries that are looking to Canada to see what we're doing and keeping their finger on the pulse of what's happening in our great country, and that's largely due to, you know, some of the dynamics of Canada, that we have great cultural diversity. We have a very, you know, the second largest landmass. And our population's not that dense. So we have great challenges in how we deliver our healthcare. We're seeing many lessons that we're learning in that right now with the COVID pandemic. But with advanced care planning, it really does come into alignment with a life well lived is really a life well planned. You know, we go through painstaking processes of planning, as you say, you know, for ultimate trips, and you know, you would plan for your provisions, etc. The same thing's true if you want to get a puppy. You know, people will research the breed of dog and decide what size of dog, and they go through this process. But we don't give our future healthcare needs a second thought, and it's part of the Speak Up program and promoting advanced care planning is that really it should be as normal a process as, you know, estate planning or financial planning, and looking toward your future and what your needs may be and what you want and what's important to you. And part of that is how we do care for each other and creating compassionate communities. And as you say, I think you mentioned one time in one of our recent conversations that we had offline was that really advanced care planning is like the homework of the heart.
Yes.
And yeah, and I'd love to have you talk a little bit more about that, and that it's really one of the greatest gifts that you could give to your loved ones and those who are in your circle of trust, for lack of a better way to describe it.
Yeah.
If you want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, let's go there.